Welcome back to our series on reason and being. We're just going to get right to it, go back to our handout, and continue discussing now being and non-being. So as we get our mind around this concept of being, we'll see we're contrasting it with non-being. Being is that which exists, it has properties, it has aspects, it has power to be. Non-being doesn't exist. It has no aspects, no properties, no power to be. But sometimes we get confused about what's the difference between being and something that seems like non-being. So this is a list of things that people in the history of ideas have taken to be non-being or have mistaken for non-being or have gotten confused about. All right, so we just talked about this. Being exists, it has properties, it has the power to be. Non-being does not exist, has no properties, and has no power to be. Now, what about this concept? Creation ex nihilo. Now, ex nihilo means from nothing. So is this from non-being? No, because creation ex nihilo is in the context of God the Creator. And if, as in theism, God is eternal, then this is creation ex nihilo is being from other being. So God is a being, and God brings into existence other being, like the creation or the temporal order. So this is not being from non-being, although sometimes people think it is. So let's not get confused over creation ex nihilo. The word means from nothing, but really it means no previously existing material. All right, so we can talk more about that maybe in some application. Is that a logical possibility? What does that mean for God to create things? Another source of confusion is unmanifest being or energy. Energy is not, that should be a T, is not non-being. Energy is an aspect of material being. Energy can be measured. It has atoms. So energy is being. Okay. What about invisible being or spirit? Is spirit non-being? Sometimes people think this. If I can't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it, it's non-being. It doesn't exist. What if it's conscious being and it doesn't have any size? That is a logical option, and it is a probability. We're going to have to look at that. Is there an argument that spirit exists? And if it exists, then it's not non-being. It has properties. It has the property of being conscious, self-aware. It has the property of thinking, the activity of thinking. Okay, what about imaginary being or fictional being? Does Moby Dick exist? Someone wants to ask me this. Does Moby Dick, a fictional character, exist? I think they were trying to stump me. And I said, well, Moby Dick has properties. He's a great white whale. And he is in a story, a fictional account. So as an imaginary being, Moby Dick exists in the mind of the author who created that fictional story and in the mind of the reader. So imaginary being is not non-being. It's an aspect of thinking. So imaginary being is we create thoughts. We can create thought worlds, imaginary worlds. They don't have physical being, but they exist insofar as a thinker is thinking them. All right, now the next one is, I had a student who recently contacted me about this. Is all A from non-A the same as being from non-being? We said being from non-being is impossible, so is A from non-A impossible? And if so, what kind of logical problems does that get us into? Then everything is being and being is everything and there's no distinctions? So let's think about that. Is A from non-A the same as being from non-being in every instance? No, it isn't. For example, you can get a child non-A from a parent A. So something can come from something else, A from non-A without it being an instance of being from non-being. This is actually an instance where you can't get nothing from something, but this is a something from a something else. All right, you can get ice cream from milk and sugar, right? Okay, so let's not let ourselves get hung up and get confused. All right, space. Is space non-being? What's out there? What's between bodies like planets and suns and stars? What's out there? Is it non-being? No, space is a relation between beings, so it's an aspect of being. We'll see that in the next point. Relation is an aspect of being, and space has it's a medium for waves, light waves, sound waves, particles to travel through. So it's not non-being. There's it's a relation between being. And then this last one, I've added some things that go by the name of nothing are not non-being. And I bring this up in the context of Lawrence Krauss, a philosopher who is a physicist at ASU, Arizona State University. He wrote a book called A Universe from Nothing. And some students think, oh, look, he argues that, something can come from nothing. The way he defines nothing, though, is something. It has properties, it has attributes, it's being. So it's not technically being from non-being. Being from non-being would be worse than Krauss's something from nothing. Incidentally, some philosophers got upset with him about this book, saying, hey, we've been arguing you can't get something from nothing for eons. And he admitted that he wrote the title of the book to be controversial and to sell more copies. So don't be sucked in by fancy titles. A universe from nothing. Ask, what do you mean by nothing? Okay, so we've talked about the distinction between being and non-being. Now let's get into being a little bit more and talk about aspects of being. Aspects of being are like the properties of being, properties of a thing. We could talk about the states of being. We could add lots and lots of details here if we wanted to. So being is being has ways of knowing it, and it's through what it does, its activities, its states. So I'm in a state of rest right now. Actually, I'm not. I'm actually actively thinking and talking. But pretend I am. I'm sitting down. You could be in the state of happy. You can be still. You could be moving. Relations. Lots of relationships. Relative. Things are relative. So near and far are relations of being. Tall, short, big, small. These are relative. Being relative to other being. Properties of being. Red, flat, solid. These are examples of properties. Activities of being, thinking, running, processing. Maybe your computer is active. It's processing right now. All right, so we could talk about the aspects of being and the properties of being and distinguish it from being in itself. We'll talk about being in substance pretty soon. Let's start this discussion about being and thinking. We're going to probably cut this one in half, but let's begin it. So it starts with thoughts are not beings, but are the product of thinking beings. So remember, thoughts are concepts, judgments, arguments. They aren't independently existing realities. They are the product of thinkers. Thoughts have no independence apart from a thinker. Now, why would we put this here? Why is this important? In the history of philosophy, philosophers have played with the idea that thoughts or ideas exist independently of a thinker. And this is one of the ways it came out in Plato's idea of the forms or the ideas. He thought there was this separate realm where ideas live, the ideal versions of things. Numbers live there, and the perfect tree lives there. This is where the world takes its form from the forms. They're like the ideal tree is up there, the ideal chair is up there. I can't even say up there because they're not physical, but it's like a blueprint. And we'll talk more about Plato's view a little bit later, but we can say, well, there's a confusion here about thinking and being. And if we thought more clearly about being, we wouldn't think thoughts are beings. All right, beings are not thoughts, as in idealism. Are you a thought in the mind of another thinker? Am I an idea, or am I a being? Now, we're going to have to give an argument for this. The world is not an idea in the mind of some other being. That's called idealism, and it's a version of anti-realism. All right. Philosophical idealism corrects naive realism or common sense philosophy, but it overextends itself. So let's talk about that for a moment. Common sense philosophers say, a rock is here because when I kick it, it hurts. Ouch, it must be real. The philosophical idealist would say, no, rocks and pain are in the mind, and so is everything we perceive. It's all in the mind. It's an idea. So idealism is trying to overcome realism, but it goes too far and denies the existence of the material world altogether. There is no matter. It's all an illusion. Have you seen the movie The Matrix? It's playing with this idea of a constructed reality, a virtual reality. So that's idealism. And realism tries to fight that by saying, no, tables are real because look, I can touch it. So we want to give an argument for realism. We don't want to have naive realism. We want to have a robust, philosophically defensible realism. So that will be the next segment, the argument for realism as opposed to anti-realism and idealism. So let's pause there and you can anticipate the argument for realism next. Ooh, it's going to be great. This is my favorite argument, incidentally.